Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm excited to be here today to interview two of our authors from the second book in the Changing Work Collective book series, which is titled Leading with Compassion, Cultivating Connection from the Inside Out, published on February 14th, 2025 as an Amazon bestseller. So congratulations to you both for becoming an Amazon bestselling published author. It's so exciting. My name is Trisha Livermore, and I am the events director and member of changingwork.org, as well as a contributing author in the first book of the Changing Work Collective series, which is also an Amazon bestseller entitled Leading with Self-Awareness, Starting from the Inside Out. You can find both of these amazing books on Amazon or changingwork.org. For anyone listening who may be unfamiliar with the Changing Work Collective, we're an online community of individuals who are committed to conscious business practices and changing work from the inside out. I'm excited to be here today to discuss book number 2 from the collective with two of our 25 contributing authors, Carrie Jacobs, who wrote chapter 2 entitled The How Not to Fake Compassion Playbook for Leaders, and Scott Govan, who wrote chapter 21, All Behavior is an Expression of an Unmet Need. Before we get started, for those listening, these are two incredible chapters that offer powerful insights into the transformative impact of compassion, both in leadership and personal relationships. So thank you both for being here today. So let's start with some introductions. Carrie, let's start with you. Just tell us about who you are and what inspired you to write a chapter on the book Leading with Compassion.
Yes, it's lovely to meet you both. I was a big fan of the first book, and a friend of a couple of the authors who wrote chapters in the first book. And so when I heard that the second book was happening, they both encouraged me to participate. And also because the title of Leading with Compassion aligns so well with what I do in my life. So while I've always been a sales leader or a sales enablement leader working in big tech, I did during COVID act as Google's head of global resilience, which was a really interesting role to take on and really helped me understand what I should be more focused on. So while at Google, I built a program there for leaders called Leading with Empathy. I left Google 2 years ago, and I now do empathy workshops with leadership teams across the globe, mainly in the tech and healthcare industries. But compassion is it's something that I think we need more than ever today. So I was very excited to have the opportunity to take part.
Thank you so much. And yes, I think these chapters and these books are such a great example of how to bring compassion into our personal lives and especially into the workplace. Scott, tell us about who you are and what inspired you to write your chapter on leading with compassion.
Yeah, so I've been a strategy and operations consultant for quite a long time, and a key element of the work that I've done for many years has been around helping organizations create more high-performing but humanistic workplaces. And a few years ago, created a program called the Respect for People Roadmap. And one of the first principles in that roadmap is engaging with compassion. And so that led me down this journey of exploring what is compassion and how do we bring compassion into the workplace. And so my chapter, All Behavior is an Expression of an Unmet Need, was really a discovery of what compassion was kind of in my personal life, but also how I used that to bring it into the work that I do when we're working with teams and when we're working with organizations to bring engaging with compassion into the workplace. And so that inspired me. I didn't originally plan to write about that. I started writing about something completely different, but something kept drawing me back to that, and so I scrapped what I originally wrote and then kind of dove into that subject. And so happy that it came out the way it did.
Yes, it's a really powerful personal story. And so if you're listening, make sure you check it out. So Carrie, in your chapter, the How Not to Fake Compassion Playbook for Leaders, I just love that title. Your personal experience with burnout and transformation is really deeply moving and really so inspiring. Without giving too many details away, after you took a medical leave of absence for burnout, it sounds like, if I understood your chapter correctly, you had a leader who had the compassion to
Yes.
allow you to pivot your career. And I'm curious how her compassion had an impact on you personally and professionally.
Well, it's interesting that you assume it was a female because it wasn't.
Ah,
And I feel like the benefactor of an enormous amount of privilege. So what happened to me was while I was on leave and quite honestly dreading returning to work in the role that I was in because it had made me sick in the first place and I was in a very dark place. I had the idea of, I actually don't want to return in that role. I want to do what I do best, which is I want to build a program. I want to really help leaders bring empathy and compassion into the workplace. So I sent an email to this VP at the time and tried to kind of tie it to business outcomes, but essentially just appealed to him as a human to say, look, I would walk across fire for you as a leader. And the reason I would do that is because you've showed so much compassion to me and others during your time of leading me. So I wouldn't do that for other leaders. So there's a difference. And I want to help the others be more like you. I've seen what good looks like. I've seen what bad looks like or needs to be better looks like. I think I think everything, the stars aligned, Trisha. It was just a moment in time where he received the email. He was dealing with some questions around leadership and how it could improve. I think he saw the value in it, realized that this was something I was really passionate about. So it was a way to keep me as an employee too, and also saw the business benefits, right? I'm sure that played a role too. And was, within hours, I had a response saying, yeah, we'll fund you. We'll get you going on this. And where I was very fortunate was to be able to have the support of a large company where I could go and speak to people in leadership development, speak to people in the DEI organization, speak to learning specialists, and just kind of pull on all of those resources and expertise to help me build the program. So extraordinarily lucky. I will say I had worked for him for over 12 years at that point in time. So there was a level of trust that was already there, but enormously fortunate to have someone who saw the value and believed in it.
yeah, it just goes to show that there are leaders out in the world that show compassion, build the trust and the relationships to allow people to pivot. Obviously, knowing that you were in a burnout space, I'm assuming, and allowing you to do what you do best, and keeping you. And I think it's really important, that we as leaders really embrace that so that the people can bring out the best in themselves, which then brings out the best in others. And I just think that was such a beautiful story. You go into more detail into your chapter, so I won't give too much away, but it's really great. And another part of your chapter, in a very courageous moment in your story, you spoke your truth bombs to a Zoom room full of executive leaders on how to genuinely lead with compassion, which was really clear and compelling. And throughout your story, you give specific action steps leaders can take who may not know how compassion shows up. So, what message would you share with leaders who might be unknowingly contributing to workplace suffering, but still have the potential to change and lead with compassion? Because your chapter is full of this stuff, and I just want to give people a taste of what you offer in your chapter.
No, thank you for asking, because one thing that I realized quite early on when I started this work was that if I was too conceptual, nobody was interested. There were leaders who were already reading Brene Brown and leaning heavily into this part of work, who loved to talk about the theory of compassion in the office and empathy and leadership. But there were also other leaders, the majority of which I was working with, who were like, just tell me what to do. Tell me what to do. So I started to build up these kind of like micro lessons, like, okay, you want to be compassionate. If you're communicating with someone over text or chat or Slack or some kind of online messaging system, then provide the full context of what you're talking about instead of just a YT question mark message, which can put the fear of God into someone who is like three below you on the hierarchy. So just like there's a difference between you messaging someone saying, hey, I need this piece of information by 12 o'clock today for the CMO, or you saying, hey, how you doing? Where should we go for lunch next week? But if you don't provide that context, and given that you have, all this authority as someone who is in a leadership position, the person on the receiving end, without that context, just sees, hey, are you there? And immediately jumps to, oh my God, what have I done? I'm going to be fired. So that's just one tiny example of things that I would work with leaders to sort of say, like, you need to have compassion for the recipient of your messaging. And then just very other simple things like, don't keep postponing or canceling your regular one-on-ones with your direct reports. I know you're doing it for valid business urgent meetings and reasons why you have to make that change. But again, the recipient just feels undervalued and starts to build a story in their own head of how unimportant they are, how they're not as needed in the organization, and they start feeling bad about themselves. So if you have to make a change to a regularly scheduled one-on-one, then provide again some context. Hey, I'm sorry, this is the second week in a row we've moved it. It can't be helped, but I'm really looking forward to meeting with you next week. Just something like that takes the edge off. So I started to build up a list of these like do's rather than don'ts. And I found that very impactful, especially for the audience that I was working with, who are very pragmatic and wanted tell me exactly what to do to be a better manager.
Yeah, and I think what's really beautiful about that is I think in general society in our society, we weren't taught how to lead with compassion. We weren't even taught what compassion is or even how to have self-compassion. So the fact that you have created this playbook of how to move from the non-emotional, non-engaged, non-caring leader into a place with allowing yourself compassion for what you're going through as a leader, and then extending that on to others. Your playbook is just beautifully well done on how people can just take something really super small and integrate that into their leadership. I think it's such a beautiful chapter. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Scott, in your chapter, all behavior is an expression of an unmet need. Without, again, giving too much of the story away, you're learning that all behavior is an expression of an unmet need profoundly changed you and your relationships. So
Mhm.
how did this understanding help you extend compassion not only to others, but also to yourself?
Yeah, so when I first heard that phrase, it just very resonated with me. I was sitting in a workshop, and the person who said it kind of off the cuff, not meaning to ha make it so impactful that it was for me. But at that time, there was a lot of things going on, and so I was in this reflective mode anyway. And when I heard that, I said, "Oh, it just it was like it's like that last puzzle piece was put in for me." And I said, "Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. That makes sense." It was like all of a sudden all the pieces were just there, and a lot of the relationships I had, the struggles that I had, the challenges that I had, or they started to make sense. And I started to realize that, we all behave in ways uh to meet our own needs. And we'll meet our own needs before we'll meet the needs of others. And so when I started looking at the relationships I had, when I started looking at the things that I was struggling with, when I started looking at even the problems that I was trying to help my clients with, I started seeing, oh, well, that person's not being a jerk. That person is just trying to get a need met. And okay, maybe they're not doing it in the most appropriate way, but I understand that their intention is something different than maybe the way I was perceiving it at the outset. And that just, it really helped me look at others, but also myself, why I did some of the things that I did in just a more compassionate way. I was able to then see it from another perspective that then really opened up the opportunity to have a different conversation, to engage in a different way, to maybe forgive, to problem solve, and to just engage in a very different way than I had in the past. And it was just completely transformative. Walking into an environment where we're trying to solve this problem, and I had this perception of why this person was doing what they were doing, and then I just looked at it as, well, if they're trying to get a need met and they're doing it that way, well, let's just understand what the and when I understood what the need was, I can say, oh, well, I see what you're trying to do. Well, have you thought about doing it this way? And it's a completely different conversation. And all of a sudden, now we're solving problems. Now we're having conversations. Now we are engaging in ways that are actually connecting us, as opposed to, creating that friction that I was experiencing in the past. And so it was the phrase just has completely transformed not only the way I engage in my personal life, but the way I engage with my clients. Um, but it has also been kind of the precipitous element that has created even the program that we created, the Respect for People roadmap. It is really the heart of the program, and what we're trying to bring to other organizations is, look at behavior from what is the unmet need, because when you do, you really see things from a completely different perspective, and it opens up a lot.
And what I really love about that is it's very relatable, right? Like understanding everybody has some form of unmet need. And then that self-awareness, that self-introspection comes into play when you start noticing, oh, what is my own unmet need? And noticing it in others really creates like this really beautiful level of awareness, which then leads to compassion. So in your chapter, you state, compassion isn't just kindness. It's recognizing someone's humanity, accepting their flaws, and supporting them without judgment. And I'm just tingling as I say that because like it just warms my heart. So, how do you practice maintaining compassion when someone's behavior is particularly challenging or hurtful?
Um, it's not easy. There's no magic wand that you can wave to say, oh, well, this is going to make it easy. You just do this thing. It is really a constant reminder that people are good and people want to do good. And if they're not doing good, if they're engaging with you in a way that doesn't feel good, or they're engaging with you in a way that maybe feels unkind, that it's maybe less about you and more about them. And it's not that that solves the problem, but it does help how I show up to engage with that person. I can say, this poor person doesn't know how to engage me in that conversation. This poor person, is acting in a way because maybe they don't have some of the tools that I have. And so it allows compassion to happen. Not that I'm necessarily saying, okay, I got to be compassionate here. That's not what's happening. But it's allowing the compassion to happen, because I can say, okay, let me not judge that person. Let me try to understand where that person's at, and then how can I help that person? And so it's just following kind of those three steps of, like, let me check myself. Let me check that judgment that I might have. Like, what a jerk. Oh, okay. Well, hold on. Maybe they're not a jerk. Maybe they're really struggling with something. And then again, moving into trying to understand where they're at. And as I start to understand where they're at and I start to understand their context, I can see that their context is not the context that I imagined, but something that maybe they're really struggling with. Okay, and then I can move to action. How can I help them? maybe I don't want to fix that problem. Maybe I just want to listen to them, or maybe I can help them think through that. And so, but I have to decide at that point, okay, what is the action that I can take that can that is compassionate? Because if compassion is seeing the other person, but then helping them in some way, because that's the action step. What is the action I can take? And sometimes the action is small. Sometimes it is just um, not calling them out because they're in a place that is where they're at, and I can understand that that place is not a great place for them at the moment. And I'm going to circle back on this later. So I wish there was a recipe, but it's more just allowing compassion to happen, I think.
And I think what I'm hearing about what you're saying is having a lot of curiosity, right? So having self-compassion when you notice yourself maybe feeling some emotion around this particular situation or person, checking in with yourself, and then realizing, okay, this might not be about me. How can I check in with them? Having compassion for them, right? So that self-compassion, that othering compassion. And, maybe it's just listening, right? To your point, maybe they just need to be heard or just seen or checked in with, and finding a way to have that action orientation around compassion. And to your point, like sometimes it's really super small.
Mhm.
People want to be heard and seen and understood, which is what you write in your chapter. And sometimes that's just enough. So I really, really love that. And to everyone listening, there is no particular recipe. It's really about practicing, right? Like it's a matter of having a significant amount of self-awareness, having compassion for yourself and for others, practicing things and seeing how they work, and then, finding different small takeaways that you can create in creating those compassionate environments. So I love the blend of your two chapters. So both your chapters reveal like how personal struggles and moments of self-regulation, self-realization can unlock a deeper sense of compassion for oneself and others. Carrie, your story highlights how authentic compassion prevents workplace suffering, while Scott, your journey shows how understanding unmet needs transforms relationships. At their core, both emphasize the true compassion isn't about performance. It's about seeing and supporting the humanity in others, creating spaces where people feel valued, understood, and empowered to thrive. These two chapters challenge the idea that compassion is a weakness, showing instead that it's a strength that drives trust, growth, and lasting change. Whether you're leading a team, navigating a family dynamics, or striving for personal growth, these two chapters provide practical lessons for leading with empathy and humanity, along with 23 other chapters that offer similar lessons and insight. I'd like to just get your perspective in this conversation on each other's chapter. Carrie, is there anything that resonates with you around Scott's chapter?
Yes, so much. I mean, I must admit, Scott, I had so much compassion for the child version of you, but also so much compassion for your mother. As a mom myself, but I'm in this situation where I'm not a single parent and I didn't have my child in my teenage years. Like it was just, I really immediately felt for her. I was curious, did you ever let the person who used that phrase that resonated with you and like brought you right into the present, did you ever let them know how much it impacted you and how it's taken you on this complete journey? And what was their reaction to that?
Yeah, I have. And in fact, I invited them in to help me build the Respect for People roadmap that is kind of designed around. And I've shared with them many times just the profound impact that their words, their few words had, and really creating a slightly different trajectory of my life and my work. And not only for the work that I do, but just how I show up as a person. One thing I loved about your chapter as well, Carrie, was this reflection on, well, we're giving people tools because I'm often giving people tools to show up in a different way, and it has crossed my mind on more than one occasion. are these tools being used for the wrong reason? And so when that came out in your chapter, I was like, yes, I'm always concerned about that too. And I love how the leader in your story was like, nobody better ever do that because this is not a place for you. And I think that's it, right? Like we can't be afraid that the tools are going to be used in the wrong way, um, because then we won't bring the tools, we won't bring the stories, we won't bring the lessons to people in the fullness that we've been able to, because then we'll be afraid that they might be misused. And is the truth is that they may be misused at times. The truth is that they probably will. But hopefully what happens is there's leaders who resonate with the stories that we're telling that then hold them accountable. Like, no, that's not what we do, right?
I think that's
So yeah, so I was very happy to hear that, that I wasn't the only one that was concerned about that.
definitely. No, I think people see through the fake, the phoniness, you
Mhm.
know. Um, but yeah, I think we have to assume positive intent always. And like you say, most times people are doing things for the right reasons.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
and to that, if I could just add one more thing, one of the things that we there's a common conversation that I have, and it's a question that I ask the leaders I work with. What percentage of people come to work with the intention to do their best? And they'll give me some number. And the only right answer is 100%. And it is not that you can prove to me that someone is not coming to do their best. It is my mindset about how I'm seeing that person or engaging with that person or showing up for that person. If I'm showing up because I think that they're coming to do less than 100%, then I'm not going to show up in the best way that I can for that person. So it has less to do with the other person and so much to do with my mindset and how I'm showing up, right?
Yeah, that's a beautiful reflection of how we perceive others based on our own perceptions of ourselves. That's
Hmm.
beautiful. So I want to switch gears a little bit around the writing process, because sometimes we've got people who listen to these and maybe are curious about like what was the writing process for each of you? Like, did you have any particular ahas as you were writing? And Carrie, I'll start with you. Like, what did you notice? What was the biggest learning through this experience in writing?
I really enjoyed it, and I did mine quite quickly. I think because the story had been living in my head for a long time. So it was fun to be able to write it down. I learned so much just about, the editing process. So what the big moment for me was that the editor we were working with said to me, "Oh, this bit at the end of your story, I think it would be really good at the beginning." And then you can tell the story and then reflect back on that starting point. I hadn't thought about chopping it up that way. I immediately did what she asked, and it was really exciting to think of just looking at it from a different timeline. So I think the big takeaway for me is just the idea of someone coming in with ideas and to just embrace them, to just yes and everything that I was asked to do. I also just found the whole process just really fascinating in terms of how what font you use and how what the spacing should be and how many words we were looking at and then it was very exciting to read the final manuscript and see how different all the stories were and all the different points of view, but like Scott said earlier, just like how similar they were too. It's always super validating when you realize that you're not the only one going through this or having these aha moments. So all in all, for me, I would highly encourage other people to get involved. It was a really positive experience for me, and I'd love to write more.
Thank you, Carrie. Yes, I really thoroughly enjoyed the writing as well. What about you, Scott?
Well, I am not a writer, so it was, I will be honest, it was a bit of a chore for me. What made it easy though is again, the editor was like, well, don't try to write it perfectly, just write. And this is your messy, disgusting version. And so when I was like, okay, well, I'll make a messy version then. And when I did that, it got a lot easier actually. So I made that first messy version, and she reminded me that it was very messy, and I had a lot of things to clean up. And one of the things that she said was, "It's a great story, but make it personal." And so when I went back and read it, I was like, "Yeah, okay, this is nothing. It wasn't anything special, the first kind of version." And that's when I started to think about, well, what is the personal part of the story? And then the story completely transformed. It became a completely different story. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to be that vulnerable. And so I said, well, let's make this messy version number two. And when I submitted it, she was like, "This is great." And I said, "Okay, well, let me think about it. I don't know. I wasn't quite sure I wanted to completely put it forward yet. But as I kind of sat with it more and more, I became more okay with, kind of putting that story out there, and just letting it kind of live on its own almost. And so it was almost a therapeutic, I guess, to be able to say, you know what, this has been kind of living inside me, and so now let it live outside of me for a little bit. So.
Thank you for that. And I think the key out of that is vulnerability, right? So these books are full of vulnerable stories that some of these authors have never shared before publicly. And maybe Scott, this is one of them for you. It's a story we have, and sometimes we have to get to the heart of what it is that we're trying to tell. So for anyone listening, this book is 25 chapters of incredibly amazing stories from 25 authors. So please check it out. So before we wrap up, where can those listening find you if they want to reach out to you or follow you? Carrie, how about you?
Oh, no, thank you so much. So I'm Carrie Jacobs on LinkedIn. I'm trying to use that platform. I'm not very good at it, but you can find me there. But my website is leadingwithempathy.com. And I try and, put podcast episodes up there, and anything that I think is relevant. So you can reach me there.
Excellent, Carrie. And how about you, Scott? Where can people find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is a great place to connect with me. Scott Govin on LinkedIn. There's not too many Scott Govin, so I should come up pretty easily. You can also go to the website respectforpeopleroadmap.com, and you'll get to see the kind of the roadmap program, and you can reach me there as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for taking the time to share your valuable insights today and your contribution to book two, Leading with Compassion, Cultivating Connection from the Inside Out, published on February 14th, 2025 as an Amazon bestseller. And you can also find Changing Work's first best-selling book, Leading with Self-Awareness, Starting from the Inside Out, on changingwork.org and also on Amazon. Thank you for listening. And if you found this content valuable, please take a moment to share this with others in your community or on your social media. Thanks again for joining us, and have a wonderful day.